Amen.
Charlotte, before you start, the lady that I used to work with, she lost her younger son 2 years ago. Her older son died in hospital, so
Hmm.
she's needs prayers. Her name is Nancy. Her son's name is Joshua.
Okay. Keep Nancy and Joshua in your prayers. Lost a son 2 years ago and got one on hospice now. That's rough. All right. Tonight we're going to be looking at the parable of the steward that you're going to find in the Gospel, Luke chapter 16. This is a good parable, and yet it has some things that might cause us to pause, and so we're going to get to talk about all of that. And the reason we might pause is because the conduct of the steward. He seems a little bit dishonest in a way in how he secures his future. He's already in trouble, so maybe he figures, may as well just dig my hole a little deeper and see what I can do to get myself out. But anyway, the first question says, discuss how a man could have been given this important responsibility. What was his responsibility? We'll begin with.
His responsibility was to manage the man's finances.
Yeah, he was a business manager, managing the finances. And what does that tell you about him?
Probably handled money.
He handled money, the bookkeeping, and etc.
Probably a pretty sharp fellow.
Probably pretty sharp.
He was trustworthy at some point.
He had earned that position, hadn't he? He'd been trustworthy. He'd probably done well. Some of you are probably familiar with a guy named the last name was Peter, no biblical reference, and he wrote a book called The Peter Principle. And you remember what the Peter Principle is? Just a short.
In a hierarchy, a person is up is continues to progress until they reach the point of incompetence.
Yeah. You rise to your level of incompetence. So you start out here and you do a good job, you get promoted. You do a good job, you get promoted. Do a good job, you get promoted. Do a good job, you get promoted. You don't do a job, and you're stuck there. So it doesn't matter whether it's a military rank or whether it's a position in a corporation, you're there. So in truth, for him or her and the company, it would actually be better if he got moved back one slot. But nobody wants to take a demotion, do we? So, but maybe this guy did pretty good until he got to such a point that he thought, wow, this is a lot of money. And I could take a handful and nobody'd ever know it. They'd never miss it. We don't know. We don't know. All right. But the odds are it wasn't his brother-in-law, but he earned that position. He did something. Yeah. They audited the books or something. That's how they handled that. And he got caught. And of course, there's a lesson there for us in that many times we think we're going to get away with things and we don't. We get caught. And we're not just talking about money. We're talking about sin. And we think, oh, I can do this and nobody will ever know it. And next thing you know, somebody knows it and maybe a whole lot of people know it. Question 2. Follow the man's reasoning as to his next vocational position. Look at verse 3 and following. Chapter 16, verse 3. The guy. Well, I hear what you're saying, but it sounds like a little more than that to me. But maybe some of the rest of you feel the same as I have the same question.
It says right here, the manager was accused of cheating him.
Yeah, cheating is kind of the key there.
Well, sorry, it says wasting his possessions of this person.
All right, different translation.
This guy is incompetent. This guy knows what he's exactly.
Yeah. And thank you, because in my point of the incompetence, I wasn't thinking about his managerial skills as much as I was thinking of his ability to resist temptation, which it's different, and I didn't express that. But yeah, I think he knew what he was doing, and he thought he could get away with it, as all thieves do, don't they?
You know, somebody told me one time that everybody has this grain of temptation in it, but it's a matter of how you can control what you do with it.
Well, I think that's true. We're all tempted constantly and in different ways, and we handle some temptations differently than others. For instance, one person may have a temptation for A, and another person has a temptation for B. And the person who's tempted by B will look at the guy who's tempted by A and say, how could he do that? That's stupid. And yet the guy who's tempted by A looks at the guy who's tempted by B and says, how could he do that? That's stupid. So here's two people, both falling to the temptation of sin, and yet looking at the other person and being critical of them for being so weak. We all have our weaknesses. May not be the same. This is an illustration. This is an example. This is a parable. All right. Okay, what's going to happen? I'm going to get fired.
Well, let's chat about that. Rose and I were talking before class about that. If you look back at verse 2, give an account, because you cannot be my manager any longer. Okay? And then if you look at number 3, the manager says to himself, oh, what am I going to do? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig. I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do when I lose my job. Well, it looked to us like he had already lost his job. But verse 4 indicates it hasn't happened.
Well, I guess he got the 30-day notice.
Yeah, we have that time to settle up. That's what he said. They said, get your affairs in order
Yeah.
and settle up. So it was like when
Yeah.
you had a notice.
We know in the corporate world things are handled differently. 50 years ago, I knew a man who worked for what was then Bell Telephone, the whole thing, before they busted it up. Judge Green did that. And at least in that office where he lived, or he worked in this big building, you would get a call to your supervisor's office, and you would walk in, and there would be two guys standing there, and they would say to you, Mr. John, you've been relieved of your duties. These two gentlemen will escort you to the parking lot in your car. We will box up your stuff in the desk and send it to you. He didn't even get to go back to his desk. There are others who say, okay, look, we don't need you any longer. Sales have dropped off or whatever, so in 2 weeks you get to, you leave. And you don't get any off time. You get 2 more weeks to work. They may lighten your duties, but for the most part, you're still in the building. So that may be for a smaller company, but they still treat the person as being somewhat trustworthy. So everybody handles it differently. Here it seems he's still being allowed to continue his job. Good. Anyone else?
Well, we don't want to get ahead of you, but we've been looking back as far as the end of verse 7.
You're getting ahead of me.
Well, I was looking at the questions, and it doesn't seem like this is going to get addressed.
Okay. Well, fire away.
Rose and I are asking, by what authority did the manager take it upon himself to tell people, cut your bill in half or reduce it by 20%? By what authority did he do this? If
Okay.
he's been relieved of his job. So if you're going to cover it, fine.
Well, it's somewhat in that first paragraph at the very top of the page, but I do want us to talk about it. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Um, and that comes in question 3 in a way.
Well, isn't that part of salvation too? Like you have so much amount of time to recover everything that you can on the accounts you were responsible for. So he was trying to gather as much as he could. So he was in like collection agency style, he was accepting less to get it quicker. That's what it was like.
in order to impress his boss.
Except none of this is his money.
But it says recover, settle what you can, and then, you're fired. So he was trying to show maybe he wasn't as bad as they thought he was, and he could
No,
get
I
it.
don't think so.
Go ahead, Mike.
What he's doing is the boss, you have to understand, he's got all these accounts. The boss says, gather them together, bring them to me, and show, and so I know what's going on. He doesn't have the authority to do anything, he's cooking the books.
Yeah.
He's going to these people and he says, look, you owe X number of dollars, so many bushels of wheat. Right now, you write out an invoice that says that this much has been taken care of, and I'll sign it, and we'll put it in there. He's cheating the guy, big time,
Again.
so that these guys that he's cutting their bill down are gonna give him a kickback. This is pure and simple, extortion.
Well, and the likelihood is he thinks he's going to get a job offer from one of those guys. Won't need to work.
Would you hire him after what he did? No way.
Well, it all depends. Crooks like to hire crooks, so we'll see what would happen there. But yeah, so here's the deal. He's already stolen from the boss. And the boss says, you're caught, you're fired. Bring me all the books so I'll know how much how much people owe me. So in the process of doing that, he comes to this guy and says, you owe 100 bushels of wheat, so change that. How about 60? That sound all right? Well, hey, how would you like to have your credit card suddenly cut off by 40%? Yeah, that sounds pretty good. And again, what he's really doing is stealing from this man again. He's already gotten fired because of stealing from his boss, and now he's stealing from him again because he's cutting, like if all of you guys, everybody here owed this fella money, and I come in and we sign a deal and I get your bill cut down by 25 or 40 or 50%, you're happy, aren't you? And you, like Mike said, probably going to give me a tip. If nothing else, maybe I can find a job somewhere. And my reputation won't be ruined because you're all going to be talking good about me. Doesn't matter what this guy says, you are going to be talking good about me. So my reputation will be saved. Wow. Yeah, then I can get a job and steal from somebody else, okay?
But I don't understand why they would think good of him when he's stealing.
Because he reduced their bill. If I cut your credit card in half, your bill in half, wouldn't you like me for that?
I would, but that doesn't change the fact that he was stealing.
Yeah, right. But you don't care because you're benefiting from it.
So you're going to be a friend to him and let him steal from you?
Maybe not, but at least don't have to badmouth him. I'm not going to badmouth him because he saved me a couple thousand, 100,000, whatever the money amount is. Wow.
He's cutting their bill, he's falsifying an invoice. And do you think the guy that just had his invoice changed from 1,000 to 800 is going to go around the neighborhood
Yeah.
Because if he does, somebody's gonna come back to him and say, oh no.
Tell this guy, and then he's going to know. Yeah. Yeah, so it does him good to keep his mouth shut. Yes, Ray?
The way I'm looking at it is, you know, like I said, those 800 gallons of oil, olive oil, do the bill for 400. Is he collecting just 400 or is he collecting 800?
No. 800 is on to the boss. But I'm going to take your bill and reduce it to 400. So when the boss comes and gets the books, he's going to think you only owe him 400.
So he's not gonna realize that he's been stolen.
Well, he does eventually, but the plan is that he won't know.
So he's not necessarily giving, he's not turning in these pre-selected things. And he's not really keeping them himself either, it's just about the paperwork. Well, I mean, I know that the debt is the debt, and
Yeah.
they owe, but, I mean, it would make more sense if he was, you know, since he was getting fired, if he would just keep some of it.
Well, I think he's getting kickback. Isn't
He may very well be getting a kickback. I mean, after all, they know what he's doing. They know he's cheating. So, but again, he's stealing. He again is stealing from the boss. The boss must be very well-to-do, because when he comes and well, I don't want to get ahead of that. All right, let's. Question 4. Explain the master. Well, that we're at this. Explain the master's admiration for the steward's trickery.
The books look good according to him. He doesn't know what's going on yet.
Look at verse 8.
That he, even though this guy was dishonest and turned out to be a bad employee, he did a good job.
You're a pretty good thief. You're a pretty good thief. You know, covering your bases.
Well, they have these popular like con shows now, and one of the big things is that the former or current con artists are the ones that help solve the crimes of what's going on because they can be in that mindset. So like a painting thief would be helping the detectives find
Yeah.
painting thief. People can look at that as
Well, you know, there are times in life when we can respect or maybe even admire someone's ability to do something bad. You know, not that we like what they did, but they were so sneaky and so good at it. You think, wow, you know. That doesn't mean you were glad to get cheated, you know, or glad to have a friend of yours cheated. You know, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about there is a criminality, what am I trying to say, quality or doing such a good job. He doesn't, the master, or how's it referred to? The master is not excited that he's stolen more money from him, but he does respect the fact that the guy was a good thief and covered his bases.
Maybe he figured 50% of something's better than 100% of nothing.
Now, the next question, read the next question.
suggest ways to apply the words of Jesus in First Peter 4.
Your question 5.
I thought we were at the master's admiration for the steward's trickery.
Okay, did I move ahead too fast? All right. Well, how do we apply it then? Question 5. Now, it's a parable. There's a lesson to it. And the master says, you're a pretty good thief. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than with the people of the light. That's what Jesus is saying.
He's talking about doing good with, because it says to get friends. Would that mean like use your money wisely to further the Christian, like doing stuff for people and things that will bring people into the kingdom and then you will have really accomplished it? Or does it not have anything to do with
I think that could have some application. Anybody else?
I'm thinking we as humans can fool each other. Because we can lie to each other. Nobody's gonna know. But spiritual people know what is right and what is wrong. I don't know how to explain it, John. We just don't feel right when we cheat somebody because we know better because God watching.
Okay. Anybody else? Karma. Well, so far it's turning out pretty good for him. Mike?
Point here is that even evil people are good at what they do. So if you want to be a follower of God, you need to take a lesson and be good at what you do.
I think it's a good application. And if we want to get more specific, we could say, he knew how to make friends. Do you? Do we make friends for Jesus? We sing a song, What a Friend I Have in Jesus. Well, we're supposed to be friends to other people. And some Christians don't try to make friends. They don't try to reach out. They said, okay, I like my circle right here, And we've seen it. We've witnessed it. Even within us, nobody's here that was involved in this, but some time ago, at one of our fellowship situations, a sister asked to sit, or went to sit down at a table, and they wouldn't let her sit there. Said this chair is reserved for somebody else, and it just so happened that was a sister that needed the contact in the friendship, but. Can we reach out? If we can't reach out to one another, how can we not reach out to the world? We've got to reach out to the world. This guy knew how to make friends. Now, we just don't like how he did it, and we don't like, the fact that he was a thief. But do we know how to make friends? A lot of times we go around all huffy and puffy and offended by everything people are doing that, oh, here comes Charles. Let's get away from him. We don't want to be near him because he's going to condemn us for everything we do. Anybody else?
Who wrote that book, Charles? How to Win Friends and Influence People?
No, Andrew Carnegie. I believe that was Andrew Carnegie. Wasn't it? No, he was a railroad magnate. Yeah, Dale. Not Andrew. Dale Carnegie. But anyway, have you read it? It's a good book. And it's fairly simple. Be nice to people. Do unto others what you'd have them do unto you. Some people get offended by the title because they haven't read the book. Or if they do read it, they read it with their minds made up and don't listen to what it says. Have you heard or read the book Think and Grow Rich? The title sounds stupid. You can sit in your chair and think all day long about money, and guess what? You're not going to get rich, are you? Well, what does he mean then? What does that title of that book mean? Well, in his words, if you start to spend a nickel to buy a newspaper, tells you how old the book is. Newspaper costs a nickel. If you start to spend a nickel to buy a newspaper, ask yourself the question, is this going to help me get rich? In other words, what the title means is think about how you handle your money. Think about it. So think about what the steward is doing, and can we do that? Can we reach out to people? Can we be kind to people? Can we make friends without stealing the boss's money? You know, we don't have to steal the boss's money. All right, where else are we? All right, somebody read question 6 for us.
The big words are present ideas for modern application of astuteness or perspicaciousness.
May have to Google that, see how to pronounce it. Okay, come on.
Wait a minute. Perspicaciousness.
Ooh. And it means?
It said that to astuteness.
Yeah.
The quality of being astute.
What does that mean to be astute? Aware? Okay. Maybe pay attention to detail. You know, a lot of times we can do things, and I'm a failure here. You know, paying attention to detail is extremely hard for me. I think I've told you or said before that I understand, as a general rule, I have a tendency to understand things quickly, and then I don't want to hear anymore. So I lose the details. And my joke on myself is, when I took first year algebra, Algebra 1, I tutored and passed half the class. When I took Algebra 2, it took the whole class tutoring me, and I still had to cheat. So, you know, because I didn't have the foundation. So what is it when you're acute? You don't just blast through life, or in this case, your spiritual life, your faith, your religion, your relationship with brothers and sisters and with the lost. You know, you pay attention to them.
You're very much aware of the details.
Yes, you're aware of the details. There's another expression called situation awareness. Somebody want to help me with that? What that means? Situation awareness.
It's like you're very, what do they call it, worldly, or you're very good on your street smart. Like, you're able to read situations around what's going on.
Okay. If you're in a dangerous area, you might pay attention to those people that are around you who might be wanting to attack you. But it can also be much simpler than that. Have you seen, I haven't seen it in a while, but there's a video that goes around of people on their cell phones. And what do? They fall into fountains, they fall into holes, they run into poles, you know. They're not paying attention to detail, they're paying attention to that phone. And I'm not downing the phone, I'm talking about their acuteness to details in life. Anybody else got anything to share? So there's an admonition here for us to pay attention.
The bottom line is you help everybody you can every time you can.
Help everybody you can every time you can. Yeah. And you don't know somebody's in trouble if you're into your cell phone or into your own life and not looking around at the lives of other people, seeing the struggle that they're going through.
If you're not looking to help somebody, you're not going to.
That's right. And you said,
If you don't pay attention to details, you're going to get lost.
yeah.
It's not going to work out like it's supposed to work out.
Yeah. All right, good.
Pay attention to
And thank you for Googling that and helping us out on its pronunciation.
Perspicaciousness.
Perspicaciousness.
It's like perspire. Perspicaciousness.
All right. Question 7. Give a Christian application to verse 10, and as a help, there's 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7 you can refer to. What does verse 10 say?
Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much.
Christian application? I'm sorry. Only get what you can handle. All right, good.
Sounds like attitude to me.
Okay. Attitude. If you're stealing pennies, what are the odds going to be that you're going to steal dollars? Pretty good. You're going to be stealing dollars too. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And that's one of the reasons why we spend so much time with our little children trying, don't take that. This was years ago. We were standing in the line at, I don't remember exactly sure where, but there was this boy, his mom and dad were up in front of him, and he was, how old you are at that height. And those little suckers that look like a pacifier? Well, there was one on the shelf right there, and he grabbed it. His mom and dad's right there, so he's watching them. Make sure they don't catch him, because he knew if he got caught, he's going to be in trouble. But he did that about 3 times. When he was pretty sure they weren't going to be turning and look at him, he'd reach over and grab that sucker and, pull off the little cap, and he would suck on it, and then he'd put the cap back on it and put it back on the shelf. He did that about 3 times that I saw. I don't know the kid. I don't know what he grew up to be, because by now he's basically an adult. It's been that many years ago. You think he's a bank robber? You think he's still stealing stuff? We kind of think, pretty good chance of that. We don't know that. Maybe he repented and got his life straight. I don't know. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we set our course by how we decide to act. And this guy that's stealing all the money from his boss got caught. Did it just suddenly happen, or was he like that all along? Who wants to run the risk? Anyone else want to share anything?
Charles, I don't know if I mentioned this years ago, when I was teaching, one of our students got caught with crackers. So we called my mother and told her, it's only crackers. That's what started. It's only crackers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can try to justify it. I think that's the biggest thing is you find a justification for it, then it's easier to do. I mean, even when I was a very small little girl, my neighbor, it was her birthday, and she didn't have any family or anything, and so I got a birthday card and like stuck it in my shorts, and I ended up giving it to her. But to me, I knew right from wrong. I knew it wasn't right. I had to hide it to get away with it. I thought because she was a nice old lady that made it okay. And so, my mom, of course, told me she scared me home the police were coming and never stole anything.
But in a child's rationalization, it made sense to you at the time. Yeah, the greater good. Anybody else? Thank you for reading the question and pronouncing the word. All right, somebody read the next question.
Compare the impact of Jesus' words on the
Worldly riches are temporary. Okay. Heavenly riches, eternal. Anyone else? What do you think is, what's a good number to consider to be rich? Depends on the individual. Changes.
What's rich for me might be different than what's rich for you.
I think it was John D. Rockefeller that made the comment that after a while, the money doesn't matter. It's just a way of keeping score. And, you know, you reach a point. Now, this has been about 40 years ago. A fella in my town was on the radio, and he said this over the radio. He says, you know, again, we're talking about 40 years ago. It's $250,000. He said, that's all. You can't spend any more than that. You know, that was his opinion then. And I think you've heard me say recently that when I graduated high school, my father bought me a $5,000 life insurance policy. And at the time, that was more than the average wage in America. The average wage was under that, 4,000 something. So he had basically bought me a life insurance policy that was a year's wage. Today, can't even buy a car with that, you know. So, which brings me to no. Anyway, but what is rich? And just suppose, for the sake of argument, you were the richest person in the world, richer than any of those oil well sheiks in the Middle East, or richer than Musk, or what's his name? Elon Musk. Maybe richer than he and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett put together. What if you had that much money and you lost your soul? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he never saw it.
You're rich if you have more than you need.
I heard, again, this was a couple of decades ago, maybe 30 years ago, someone said that if you are in America and on welfare, you are better off than 90% of the rest of the world. So, we get wrapped up in our money and our wealth and wanting more and needing more, we think. And I'm not saying we need to live in poverty, that everybody needs to live in a cardboard box. I'm not saying that. But we're just trying to make the connection here between material wealth and that spiritual wealth we have with God. And this shrewd manager was shrewd in material things, but not shrewd in spiritual things. And that's what I think much of this parable is about, being wise about our relationship with God. All right, the next question. Did anybody read 1 Corinthians 4 and 2? Read that out for us. It's right after Romans. Now there's a word, faithful. What does faithful mean? Loyal. True to the cause. And so we come back to the steward. Who is he faithful to? Himself. Still a problem, isn't it? And you look at our society is basically you're true to yourself. We need to learn to be true to God. All right, question 8. Compare the impact of Jesus' words on the phrase true riches. Well, we kind of talked about that. Anybody else want to add anything to it? Question 9. Describe the difficulty of serving two masters, verse 13.
You're not able to give both of them your 100%.
All right. Conflict of interest.
Like when I started the band, the first band, I didn't like it when one of our saxophonists played the other band that did the same thing we were doing. So I told him, you either go with that band or this band because we're not gonna be competing against the other band in the same gig and you benefit, you know? It's just a conflict of interest.
Okay. What if you got two bosses?
What if you have two wives? I'm just throwing that out.
Two bosses, two wives. You're in trouble now. Yeah.
You can't do that, which is why God said one man, one woman.
Go ahead.
You can only have one boss at a time. You can have sub-bosses. There's hope. If you have two bosses, there's a conflict, like you said, conflict of interest. One of them has to be with the other.
What does the Bible say? Is you will love one and detest the other? Or you'll hate one and love the other?
Yeah. You know, let's say you're an enlisted man in the military, and pick a rank, I don't care. An officer comes up to you and says, "Do such and such," and turns around and walks off, and he's no more than going around the corner. And another officer with the same rank comes up to you and says, "Do the opposite." So what are you going to do? Yeah, well, you can't do both because they're opposites. So what are you going to do?
The truth of the matter is opposite. When, reality, you have to obey the one that is your boss.
Yeah, not the captain from another section or another company, whatever it's called, but your captain. And in life, when we try to serve two masters, we invariably find ourselves in conflict of interest, and we find ourselves in life typically doing what we want to do. Like if, in my silly illustration, if two captains came and told me what to do as a private, then they turn around and both leave, then what am I going to do? I'm basically going to do what I want to do. And that's the world. And when I do what I want to do, in reality, I may be following one of those guys who told me what to do, one of those ranks that told me what to do something. But the truth of the matter is I'm doing what I want to do.
You also have a choice of deciding who your master is. On one shoulder you got the devil, on the other shoulder you got
Yeah.
the angels. Who's going to be my master?
Yeah.
The one that, like you said, what I want.
Yeah, and spiritually speaking, that's what we have. We have Jesus wanting us to do one thing. We've got, the devil wanting to do us another. And the devil appeals to us more because he appeals to our weaknesses. We tend to go that way. Yeah, the enjoyable way. Anyone else? We have to make a decision. Have to make a choice. We have to choose. And the better thing to do is to choose before. Going back to what Mike said, you choose to follow your officer, not the officer from another group. And spiritually speaking, who's our general? Jesus. That's who we choose to follow. But you have to decide that in advance. And a lot of times we decide at the moment. And that's when we tend to go the wrong way. All right, question 10. Verse 14. You ever sneered at anybody? Probably have, but I don't know how to do it. I mean, do what? Takes talent. Sneer. How do you sneer? Well, what does sneering imply?
Lack of respect for one thing.
Lack of respect, a contempt, a disrespect. You know, you give that look out of the corner of your eye, twist your mouth, and maybe you mumble something. Ridicule, make fun of people. Yeah. All right, that's verse 14. The Pharisees who loved money heard all this and were sneering at Jesus.
He was going against what they felt.
Yeah. And you know, the sneering is somewhat public. I mean, they may not be standing up and shouting it, but everybody can see it. You know, I don't know this for a fact, but I have a tendency that the average person who listens to Jesus, when he says something a little controversial, that they turn and look at the Pharisees, see how the Pharisees react. Well, in this case, it seems like the Pharisees are expecting people to look at them because they're sneering. They want to be seen as disagreeing with Jesus. Oh. Yeah, and the whole point is what he's been saying, don't put money ahead of God. And the Pharisees don't like that. Now, they probably wouldn't come right out and say it. But money's important. You remember what they said about the oath? About swearing? Swearing on the temple? Not to swear. The Pharisees didn't want you to swear on the temple, but
You can swear on the temple, but you couldn't swear on the gold of the temple.
yeah.
That's what the Pharisees said. You can swear about the altar, but you can't swear about the gift on the altar.
Because,
It was worth something.
yeah, had some value to it. Money, you know. Yeah.
Well, with, right.
There's some pretty strong religious groups today that do that. Equate wealth with righteousness. If you're rich, then you must be a righteous person. Or if you want to be rich, be a righteous person. All right, next question. What are some things that we could admire in the manager? This is a guy that got caught with his hand in the jar. He was not honest, but he was smart. Good. Anybody else? Could think on his feet. Good. What else? He could make friends, even if it cost his boss some money. Now, is there another lesson there? You know, even the worst person on earth has some redeeming qualities. You know, some kid commits a horrible crime. You go to his house and knock on the door. Mother comes to the door, and what does she say? He's a good boy, you know. Well, we've got witnesses and evidence and videotape, and we're going to take him in custody. But he's a good boy. Well, is she lying? Yeah, and in many ways, he probably is a good boy. And the same thing can be said about every criminal that's in prison and about every one of us when we engage in sin. We have some good talents. We have some good qualities, some good abilities. We may not always use them the way they're supposed to be used, but they're there. Or may not be directed toward everybody. It may be just directed toward our specific family or close friends. So the challenge is be faithful was the word that you read a moment ago. And we're faithful to God.
Bonnie's parents and Clyde's parents, I said, they were good.
Yeah, yeah.
He was raised a Christian boy. See what happened.
Yeah.
That is true, but my brother, or long to be tell you, he's a good person. He's one of the best people that I know, character-wise. I mean, he's very loving and kind, he just got an addiction. And to beat that addiction, he robbed a Subway. He didn't hurt anybody, but he's in prison, and he's a good person.
And see, like I said, that's true of each and every one of us. We tend to look at the sinners out in the world, and yet when you get acquainted with him, you find out, hey, I really like that guy. He's funny, and we enjoyed it. He's a sinner. And maybe he is doing some crimes. So, rather than run from those people, and I'm being very generic here, rather than say, I don't want to have anything to do with the world, we just all should move into the same neighborhood, live on the same block, and just associate with one another. Well, what's that going to do? It's definitely going to stop the growth of the church, isn't it? We don't build a fort and live in the fort to be protected by the wicked, evil people who are out there in the world. All right. Now, what are some things that are not to be admired about the manager? He was dishonest? Doubly so. He was a thief and a liar. It's hard to be a thief without being a liar. I think you can lie without necessarily being a thief, but if you're a thief, you're going to be a liar too.
I don't see how this manager or the boss can ever trust this person again. You can't trust this person.
I think he lost his job.
But what I'm saying, when he said, you've done well, do this, whatever he did,
Yeah,
still, you've done well, but you're still fired, I don't trust you.
right. Yeah, this is almost like one thief firing a bigger thief, or a big thief firing a little thief. Yeah, I don't think he kept his job. Anyone else? Awfully quiet now. Question 13. Do we want to talk about that?
I think the question should be, who should be working harder to even more?
Yeah. Who should be working harder?
We know where the answer is.
We know what we need to be doing, but it's not always easy. And sometimes we build false walls, in our own mind, and we hold ourselves back. But we ought to be the ones doing it. Question 14. How does the use of our money affect us eternally? Makes it more difficult to get to heaven if we misuse it. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Not all evil. Tired of hearing that. But there are some people who do anything for money. Can be a big stumbling block, and yet on the other hand, some of the greatest people that we read about in the Bible were what? Very wealthy. Yeah, they were rich. So we can use money and use it well.
And you can be blessed with money.
Mm-hmm.
Just having the priorities. And even as a Christian, it's hard, you know, as a mother or a father, you know, money is what gives you security, is what takes care of you, your household and your family. And we're supposed to rely on God first, but that's hard to do when you're responsible for others, especially around children.
Yeah.
What you do with them.
Yeah. And I still like that quote we've got attached to the bulletin board back there about the guy saying he drives a Rolls Royce, and his grandfather rode a camel. He rides in a Rolls Royce, and his grandson will ride a camel. Because what he's basically saying is it's difficult to pass wealth on, as it is difficult to pass faith on to our children. We can do it, but it's not always a snap as easy as we think it is. So, money can be a blessing, but if we let it become too important to us, it becomes a handicap. What is to be condemned in this story, in this parable? Love of money? Yeah, good. It's a biggie. Status, love of status. Yeah. Dishonesty. Power. Being unfaithful. Unfaithful to his employer. I assume these people are Jewish. That's typically how they are. So he's also being unfaithful to God. Not just to his master, but he's unfaithful to God. And what may we conclude about material wealth and riches? Well, we've talked about that several times tonight. It can be a blessing. It can be a handicap. And our major lesson, I'm sorry, say again? Cannot serve two masters. I appreciate your participation. We'll still be in chapter 16, but next we'll be looking at the rich man and Lazarus. Junie said his mother and brother are getting along, doing a little better. We got any update on anybody else?
And I went to see James today, and I waved him off. He has moved. They took him in an ambulance back to Carlsbad.
James Jones has gone back to Carlsbad. Well, they're going to have to move back to the Carolinas because he's not working, and